He's the director of the Master of Arts in Educational Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship program at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Please welcome to the stage, Todd Cherner.
Thanks, bud. Hey, how y'all doing? Woo!
Hey, Todd.
Yeah.
You need to be up there so they can see you on the camera.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We good.
You know, I'm a tall guy, so I take that for granted, but it really is long and not narrow. All right. So anyway, this is my first public speaking event since post-COVID, or wherever we are with COVID. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. And tonight I'm going to talk about the Edtech Marketplace. So that's my title. And the Edtech Marketplace is really near and dear to my heart. And the reason it is because I'm a former classroom teacher, I'm a researcher, I'm an innovator, and I'm an entrepreneur. And what the EdTech Marketplace means to me is opportunities for teaching and learning. And tonight, I'm going to talk to you about the EdTech Marketplace as an end user, so the consumer side of it. I'm not going to talk about it as a developer as much, but people who use the products. So this is a picture that I'm sure you all are familiar with. This is taken at the North Carolina Technology and Education Society's annual conference in Raleigh. I attend this conference every year. It's attended by teachers throughout the state, throughout the region, and it's wonderful. And the reason I'm showing this is because it actually shows one version of the EdTech Marketplace, right? The vendors are there, they're showing their products, they're showing their services, they're showing their wares. And the conference goers, they browse, and it's a really cool moment. But this isn't the only place the EdTech market exists, right? It exists if you search for products online. It exists in the App Store. It exists in labs where they're developing products. It exists in fairs and maker spaces. All these different areas are where the EdTech Marketplace exists. And what I find really interesting about it is this is where we're seeing it go. Currently, we're seeing huge investments in AR, VR, artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchains, and you can see on that graph, and this is from one of the companies that I like to follow, is Holland IQ. They have wonderful visuals, but if you were to pull up this data from the World Economic Forum, from UNESCO, a whole other variety, these trends are going to be consistent. And what this means is we are being flooded with different products and services being developed. Some good, some not so much, some in the middle, and this isn't new. In fact, when the iPad came out, 2012-ish, I actually started my own startup around this. And the problem that I saw at the time was, there's an app for that. Y'all remember that line? There's an app for that, right? And so all these teachers are getting iPads, and they're being told, there's an app for that. But how do you actually teach with it? Or better yet, how do you actually pick the EdTech you want to use, the apps you want to use? And so we did a lot of A/B testing, and we found through research of our own, through the peer review research, that teachers were literally drowning in a sea of apps. And we use this as our catchphrase. Drowning in a sea of apps, app ad review as a lifesaver. And this really resonated with people. And our idea was, we will help you pick the EdTech, and we'll tell you how to use the EdTech, and we'll rate the EdTech. And we did through a research base. But the reason I'm showing this is because the numbers you see here, they're the next evolution. They're showing you what's going to become. This picture right here, and I really enjoy this picture, but this picture right here shows what classrooms look like today. The students have some sort of tablet, some sort of device. They're accessing their learning management systems, the digital tools, a whole variety of things, right? We have robotics and STEM and all these wonderful things that are out there. When we think about this, that AR, VR, AI, we start to get into something called mixed reality. And I feel Matsudu from Mirror Worlds really does a nice job. So if you look at that bottom graphic down there, it shows that the kids are wearing VR, they're experiencing these learning immersive spaces, but the difference that we're going to start seeing, according to Matsudu, is that it's not going to be just computer generated, right? We're going to have the physical environment is going to impact the immersive environments that they'll actually access through the AR and VR. And this becomes mixed reality. What's going to happen is we're going to continue to see investment in this. We're going to continue to see more and more choices come out. Teachers are going to continue to feel overwhelmed, and developers are going to continue to develop these products. Good, bad, but this is probably what we're going to happen. So I introduced the idea of critical consumerism. And what this means to me is, as the end user, you need to understand what it is you're looking for in an EdTech product and how you're actually going to use it. Now, context, I believe, is incredibly important. I teach at a graduate school. I taught high school at a Title I school down in Central Florida. I've worked with schools of all different spots, literally from South Carolina all the way to Portland, Oregon. It was kind of like the solar eclipse from a few years back in reverse, right? So these are the questions that I think about. These are my questions. I want to know who designed the EdTech. Did the developer design it, or was it designed through human-centered works, right? How did that happen? I want to know the data. What data actually demonstrates that the EdTech is effective? And it's not only the data. I want to know that that data is legit. I want to know that it's valid. I want to know who collected that data, how it was analyzed, and how it's being interpreted. I think that's important. And then the other thing that I want to know is we have a variety of different pieces of EdTech, right? Some of them do very similar things. A really easy example that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with is if you want to compare Microsoft Word to Google Docs, or if you want to get more involved, Pear Deck to Nearpod. What's better? What makes it better? What's the cost? What are the alternatives? As we move down to the bottom left, who's represented in the EdTech? Who's not represented in the EdTech? There's a lot of diversity, equity, inclusivity, representation that needs to be considered. And the research will tell you, and your own works will tell you, there are people who are and who are not represented. That needs to be a consideration. I also think of college and career readiness, right? I want to know, is the EdTech teaching valuable skills? And not only college and career readiness, I also want to know about civic life. I think media literacy is really important right now. How's the EdTech doing that? Is it supposed to do that? And then how much background knowledge is needed to use the EdTech? Like, is it intuitive? Can I get in and get going? Or how much professional development is needed? So I leave you with this thought. The EdTech marketplace is vast. It is broad. We are going to see more and more EdTech come up. Following the move to remote learning and back, we've learned lessons, good, bad, otherwise. Be critical in your choices about which pieces of EdTech to use, how you're going to use them, and whom you're going to use them with. And I look forward to y'all's questions. I think I got that in 5 minutes, yeah?
Sure, we'll go with that. All right, give it up for Todd Cherner. Now it is time for Q&A from you. Raise your hand like this gentleman right up front is doing. I'll bring you the microphone. You get to ask your questions. First question coming up.
When you're evaluating an EdTech, what quantitative criteria do you use to rank one compared to the other one?
I love that question. Very early in my career when I was doing app ed review, I was really confused by that, right? Because we were looking at apps and like what makes an app a 4, what makes an app a 3, what makes an app a 5, right? Very subjective. So the way that I do it is I actually draw from the research base. Ooh, you got swag. I actually draw from the research base, and we actually created a 26-point rubric that really gets in detail about what it is we want. What are the aesthetics? Where is the knowledge? How is the design? How are you able to use it? The context again. How is diversity represented? How can you collaborate with it? And so what we did is we systematically did a review of literature, and then we used, from that review of literature, we actually developed an entire rubric around it, and I'd be happy to share it with you.
That 26-point rubric is, of course, in the shape of a cube. Next question is coming to you from your left.
Yes, sir. Great presentation. My question is about the creators of EdTech. What do you find is helpful for those who are producing this EdTech to be able to do to help the consumer be more critical, even in their efforts to sell their own products?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what we need to be when thinking about the developers is we need to be transparent in how it was developed. Who was it tested by? Who were the collaborators and partners who maybe helped co-design it? Probably they weren't doing the technical side of it. But how were you actually able to build empathy? How were you able to identify what is the challenge you're trying to respond to with the EdTech? And then how did you actually prove or at least demonstrate that your ed tech is actually doing that with a data-informed approach. I think that's really important. I think transparency in the design of how it was and then how it was tested is paramount.
All right, another question coming here from Stage Center.
I have a question about the overwhelmingness that the teachers are feeling at this point, and you're going to throw something else on them at this point. I know you're reducing the number of apps, but what are you doing to kind of alleviate and make them feel better about accepting this type of teaching?
That's a very important question, and I really appreciate it. So I think context is important. You have to understand how and why they're using a piece of ed tech. I think it's also important to remember that there literally have been centuries where we didn't have digital technologies, and there's a craft to teaching, and ed tech is not meant to replace the teacher. I think when teachers are struggling and they're feeling overwhelmed, I think it is by far best practice to reduce the amount of ed tech they're using, find ed tech that has a lot of utility, can be used in multiple ways, but really focuses on a limited amount of ed tech. So for example, a PowerPoint software, right? So whether you're doing Google Slides, PowerPoint, whatever, there's a lot of utility. It's not just that. Like if I can have people collaborate on it, one of the things I like to do, for example, is I like to make it into a digital gallery walk to where I assign each student a slide and I create the slide as a template and then I let the students populate that. So now I'm using PowerPoint not just for information, but I'm using it for collaboration, and then I can use that with the think, pair, share technique. So I think it's really matching the ed tech to pedagogical strategies that's important. And I think when we just say, hey, this is good for this, this is good for this, this is good for this, now I have a bunch of pieces of ed tech that I have to monitor. If I'm able to really consolidate that and find a really good return on investment of my time to learn it and really be able to use it in multiple ways without having to switch platforms all the time, I think that is a key.
Our last question will be coming from the center aisle here.
Thank you. Nice presentation, Todd. Thanks for your thoughts. My wife is a teacher, so you're right. They use quite a bit of applications and they're lost in it. So one thing she is more concerned is the kids are more glued to the computers because of the virtual learning and all these things, right? Now, on top of that, we are introducing this mixed reality, and we have been talking about metaverse. So how do you balance the real reality versus kids starting in a virtual reality all the way from very young age?
Yeah, that's also a doozy of a question. Really nice. So I'm concerned that people are losing, to a degree, the ability to communicate face-to-face. I think sometimes when we start having all these mixed realities, I think that we need to be able to balance it out with person-to-person interaction. And I think there really needs to be a strong balance between what we do with technology and then what we do with our analog. I do think the metaverse is coming. Whether it's coming sooner or later, we'll find out. But I do think that we need to be able to have people to have identities and be able to understand that they have an identity that perhaps is their digital identity, but they still have an analog identity. As these become more blurred, I think it's going to be important that they know where that lines of blurriness happen and to really form their humanness. And that's, I have a concern there. And I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't want technology to take away our humanity. And I think there's a way to balance it out. I don't think we know what that answer is yet, to be completely honest. And I think we're moving very fast in that direction. I think the investments that I showed up there are accelerating that pace. And that's something that I think about a lot, to be honest with you.
All right, give it up for Todd Cherner.